budget process. Instead of the irresponsibility that has been so traditional in the Congress, we might now see that the added costs of Operation Desert Storm will serve as a wake-up call, and we may well reevaluate federal spending and taxing programs top to bottom. Certainly, that's what's required with the awesome deficits that are staring us in the face.
Representative Christopher Cox, thank you.
C-SPAN, the cable satellite public affairs network, and its companion network, C-SPAN 2, are brought to you as a public service of the cable television industry.
Up next, we take you to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for a U.S. military news briefing conducted at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. You will hear from Brigadier General Pat Stevens, who talked to reporters about the most recent developments in the Persian Gulf War.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to United States Central Command's daily news briefing. Our briefer today is Brigadier General Pat Stevens. General Stevens is the Deputy Director of Logistics for United States Central Command. Following his presentation, the General will answer your questions. Again, I'd like to remind all of you that we'd like just one follow-up per person. Ladies and gentlemen, General Stevens.
Thank you, Mike. And ladies and gentlemen, a good day to all of you. This is the 13th day of operations in Operation Desert Storm. Today we have over 700,000 coalition air, ground, and naval personnel present in the theater. More than 110 coalition combatant ships are participating in that force. Our weather yesterday, we had some clouds in a few of the target areas. These had a minimal effect on our operations, although they did have some minimal effect on our reconnaissance efforts. Today's weather, as you know, is similar to yesterday's. Our round-the-clock air campaign continues. The focus today has been on offensive counter-air and interdiction. Our targeting priorities continue to be command and control, airfields, Scud locations, lines of communication, Republican Guard areas, and battlefield preparation. We have 9 countries participating in offensive air operations. Our sortie total today exceeded 2,600 sorties, of which more than half were combat, and of that total, some 16% were flown by our coalition partners. Yesterday, we had one more missing pilot as a result of the Harrier loss, for a total today of 15 U.S. air crewmen missing. In air-to-air combat, yesterday one Iraqi MiG-23 was shot down by a U.S. Air Force F-15. That brings the total to 8 MiG-29s, 9 F-1s, 8 MiG-23s, 2 MiG-25s. And updating an item from yesterday, approximately 80 to 90 Iraqi aircraft have now flown into Iran, of which we assess some 35% are civilian and military transports, and 65% fighters and bombers. Iraqi aircraft destroyed on the ground remains at 23. We have no change from that count today. Our ground forces remain in a defensive posture. They have continued to receive sporadic artillery fire. The U.S. ground forces are conducting artillery and counter-battery missions. Naval forces are conducting strike operations, surface surveillance, and combat air patrols. Yesterday, A-6s attacked 2 Iraqi Silkworm launchers. Both launchers were assessed as being destroyed. Naval aircraft again attacked Iraqi ships and port facilities at Qasr Naval Base. We noted 2 Scud firings last night, one towards Riyadh, which was intercepted and destroyed, and one towards Israel. Our total to date now is 53, 27 towards Saudi Arabia, and 26 towards Israel. I'd like to bring you up to date on the status of the oil slick. We, of course, continue to monitor it. The fire that has been briefed to you at the Sea Island terminal is now out, and the flow from that terminal has stopped. The slick appears additionally to be breaking up. The southern portion of the slick is approximately 25 miles south of the Kuwaiti border and headed generally in a southeasterly direction. One additional comment that I would like to mention: there have been some recent news reports that U.S. forces fired on and killed an unknown number of Moroccan troops in Saudi Arabia. This report is absolutely false. There have been no incidents involving U.S. and Moroccan troops. In that regard, I'd like to reiterate a statement that's been made many times. We continue within the coalition to work very, very well together. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my statement, and I see some hands in the air. Yes, sir.
General, there's a recent report that a building was bombed in Baghdad, the Ministry of Industry, at which some Allied POWs were being held. Perhaps one of the coalition POWs was killed, according to the Iraqi sources. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I don't have a reaction because I'm unaware of the report, and I'm afraid I can't verify it at all. Charlene?
Just a follow-up to that, what, if any, channel of communication do you have between Iraq for information like that, as well as the 4 missing CBS camera people? I mean, is there any channel of communication to verify reports like that,
yeah, Charlene,
and the POW?
Yeah, first of all, about the missing folks we've got up there, the air crewmen. We don't have any communication with them that I'm aware of, and that's unfortunate because under the terms of the Geneva Convention, we should have access to them through the International Commission of the Red Cross, and we haven't had that to date, and that's very unfortunate. As to the crew of missing colleagues of yours, no, we don't have any contact with them either. Yes, sir.
Do you have any more idea as to why these planes are going to Iran? And any new information as to why?
No, we have no idea why they're going over there. I can only reiterate what I said last night. I assess they're going over there because they're trying to avoid combat and preserve themselves. And beyond that, we have absolutely no notion. Yes, sir.
General Kelly said at the Pentagon briefing yesterday that yesterday's flights came from, I believe, 2 air bases. Today's, I gather the number have continued today. How many planes have gone to Iran in the last 24 hours, and from how many air bases inside Iraq?
Well, the numbers I gave you tonight, in my remarks, there were some 80 to 90 that we assessed being over there in Iran. Now, I think the number last night was 69, so the difference is that. As to where they're coming from, I can't comment on that, and nor can I comment, as I suggested, on why on earth they're doing that. Yes, sir.
Question. Has there been any communication between the U.S. military and the Iraqi Air Force? Any messages sent, any messages received? And related to that, are you leaving a way open, running room for these pilots?
To my knowledge, no, sir. I know of no communication between the 2 forces whatsoever. Yes, sir.
Do you fear that the resignation today of the French Minister of Defense could change something in the running of the Operation Desert Storm?
I heard today of that resignation, and I have absolutely no idea, nor do I expect that it would cause any change in the reaction. That's a question, again, that would more properly be referred to our diplomatic colleagues.
General,
yes, sir.
You've said repeatedly that it's military targets which are the focus of this campaign. How do you define a military target, particularly when it comes to something which serves both civilians and military, such as water supply plants, oil refineries, that sort of thing, even government departments like the Ministry of Industry?
I don't want to comment directly on how we make those assessments, but I will tell you that when we look at targets, we're targeting things which directly contribute to the enemy's ability to conduct war. And we will continue to target those until we eliminate that ability in accord with the resolution of the United Nations. And it's very difficult, and I understand the nature of your question. Yes, sir.
General, is there any attempt to shoot down these fleeing Iraqi planes before they get to Iran? And if not, why?
If we're there and they rise up from the ground, we'll go after them. If we're aware of where they are on the ground, we'll go after them. If we're near enough to pursue them, we will. We will not chase them, obviously, out of the zone of war. Yes, sir, Richard.
There have been some mixed reports on these planes. There have been some that said that the aircraft were, some were in flames and were crashing. The Iranians said that. Other reports said that some planes appeared to be escorted by others. This would suggest there are two different things going on here. Have you had any way to look at those reports, to analyze it, and try to come to some kind of a judgment of what's really going on here? Are those reports been dismissed as hogwash, or how do we evaluate these particular things?
We've dismissed nothing. We don't know what's happening. We're evaluating everything we can get our hands on, Richard. I wouldn't want to speculate, again, on what they're up to. I'm aware of the same reports you're talking about. Yes, sir.
A simple question about the numbers. Although the numbers you used yesterday were 69, the numbers Pete Williams used and General Kelly used yesterday, U.S. time, East Coast time, were 80. Is the number you're using today a higher number than that 80? Have more planes fled to Iran since the Pentagon briefing of yesterday?
Yes, I understand your question. The answer is no, I don't think so. My number is 80 to 90. That's our number, our CENTCOM number. And I understand the problem it creates for the community with the kind of communications we have for you all to try and track these things at different times of the day. But I'll stick with the 80 to 90, and I won't argue with his number.
Okay, one follow-up. No, I wasn't suggesting
Yes,
you were
sir.
arguing with your number. I thought you might be saying there were still more planes fleeing. One follow-up with regard to reports about these planes and what might or might not be happening. There have been reports that in addition to the planes fleeing, there have been at least one transport plane that's gone back and forth, perhaps indicating some sort of arrangement. Do you have any information about that?
Absolutely not. Yes, sir.
You said the oil slick is heading southeast. Does that mean that it is likely to hit the coast in some other country besides Saudi Arabia or the Emirates?
And I'm not a hydrologist, but I will tell you that some of the hydrologists who have looked at that oil slick and looked at the currents that traverse the northern Arabian Gulf will tell you, yes, there's every chance if you follow
Where do you
those
think
currents.
that would hit? And are we in contact with is the United States team in contact with the other countries that might?
Yeah, I can't answer the question about whether the U.S. team is. Of course, the U.S. team is out here to help the Saudi government deal with that issue, and it is an international issue, and we're very aware of that. But I don't want to speculate any more than I want to speculate on the outcome of the campaign on where that oil is going to land. Yes, sir.
General, perhaps you can help me. There seems to be some sort of discrepancy here between the much vaunted air superiority, air supremacy over Iraqi airspace and the fact that they can fly 90 aircraft to Iran, including 35% of them being relatively large, slow-moving civilian transports, and you saying that if they rise off the ground and we're in the neighborhood, we'll shoot them down. If you're running combat air patrol over Iraq, and you've got all kinds of aircraft over Iraq, how come none of these are getting shot down unless you are allowing them to flee?
You know, that is an extremely large country, and we're conducting the campaign as it has been designed on a day-to-day basis as we go along. If we encounter one of those aircraft, if we're able to encounter one of those aircraft, we'll go after it, whether it's in the air or on the ground. If they rise up and get out of there before we can catch them, then they're going to be gone. And it's just that simple. Follow? Yes, go ahead.
If I could follow, sir, but you know where they're going, and you know where they're coming from. We've been told that in Washington, so it's not like you have to patrol all the borders of Iraq. It's a relatively well-defined bit of airspace that they're flying through to flee.
And you would like me to speculate on our conduct of the campaign. I won't do that for obvious reasons.
I'm not, sir. You're saying it's a large country. That's the reason
Yes.
we don't get them all. Perhaps I could ask it this way. How many aircraft headed for Iraq have you managed to shoot down?
I can't answer that and won't. I apologize. Yes, sir.
Sir, earlier you said that there have been no communications between the Iraqi planes leaving Iraqi airspace and U.S. forces. We know from earlier AWACS briefings that we're able to monitor other frequencies such as international distress frequencies 121.5 and 243. megahertz, have you been able to monitor any traffic between the Iraqi aircraft and the Iranian ground stations?
Well, that's similar to the question about the traffic between all the air forces flying there, and no, I'm not aware that we're doing that, and I won't comment on whether we have the capability.
General,
let me please go back there. Yes, sir.
General, you said you don't know exactly what's happening in terms of these planes going to Iran. What inquiries have been made in the last 24 hours? It's a question that came up yesterday as well about exactly what's going on. Have you asked the Iranians? Have you asked the ambassador to the UN?
That's the answer to the question. It's a matter really for the diplomats, and it's not a matter for this command, and so I'd prefer to leave that answer to the State Department. In the back, in the very corner, seated down, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, General, it's been reported that there are two separate components to the oil slick. One is the five ships that were berthed that General Schwarzkopf described had Iraqi crude, which is now washing down the coast, whereas the oil coming from the oil buoy 8 miles offshore is going into the middle of the Gulf, and that's Kuwaiti crude. Is there any way that you can elucidate on that? The Iraqi crude is a lot heavier and more harmful to the shoreline, I'm told.
Yeah, I'm aware of both of those spills, and you know, I really can't elaborate more than what the chart General Schwarzkopf showed you the other day. Beyond that, they appeared to have kind of gone together down there. I know they have two sources, but I'm kind of speaking of that slick as one now. Yes, sir, just sitting there in the corner.
Your latest estimates of the number of POWs in Baghdad and from which countries they come, please?
I don't have that estimate, except for those missing Americans who are there, and I'm not certain where they are for the reasons we've already talked about. Yes,
General, what is the command's assessment of the latest interview given by Saddam Hussein and his claim to have biological and chemical and nuclear capability to put on his Scud missiles and other weaponry?
And I commented a little bit about this last night, we will never ignore a single capability that he may have. We take those into account. We assess anything that's remotely possible that he may have in his arsenal and make every effort to guard against his ability to use that against us. Beyond that, I won't speculate or comment on what he may or may not have there. Yes, sir.
General, during the flights of these Iraqi aircraft toward Iran, are you seeing any sympathetic air activity by the Iranian Air Force that would mask their departure?
To my knowledge, no. And I'm aware that there have been reports in the press of activities like that. Yes, sir.
The Iraqi ground troops have mines in front of them and Revolutionary Guards behind them. What, if anything, can you do to make it easier for anyone who wants to surrender?
That's a tough question, you know, until we perhaps get up there someday and sort of clear some of that out. And it's an area I think we went into last night, or at least it's been gone into before, about the difficulty that a defector has in leaving his unit and coming south. He's first got to leave the unit. He's then got to get through the enormous defenses that have been constructed there, which are almost as difficult to come through from his side as they are to penetrate from ours. And it's a real problem for him. In the very back, yes, sir.
Yesterday, you said you would not be disappointed about these planes going to Iran because it takes them out of combat. And today you said that they would be attacked on the ground or in the air if you were near in the vicinity. Is there a contradiction there that I'm...
No, I don't think so at all. If they remain in the theater of war, as an enemy aircraft, we will attempt to destroy that capability. If they leave the theater, they're gone.
But if they're on their way to Iran, you would let them go or you would shoot them down?
If we see them in the air and it's an enemy aircraft, we'll take them on. And let me come back to you. I missed you.
During those clear days, were you able to get any information on how much damage has been done to the Republican Guard?
We've talked about that before, and the issue is the difficulty of assessing damage to ground forces. Yes, we're able to get some assessments about that, and yes, we're doing some damage. I can't quantify that for you, but we're seeing effects. We're definitely seeing effects of their morale, of their capability suffering under that attack. Yes, sir.
If you can't tell how effective you're being How will you know when to begin a ground assault?
We think we'll know that very well, and we'll be ready.
Can you tell me what sorts of things will be the evidence that you're looking for so that we will have a way of understanding what you're looking for?
Because if I share that with you, I'll be sharing it with somebody else. Let me go over here.
Can you confirm whether the Iraqi troops in Kuwait are now cut off by land, by sea, and by air? In other words, totally cut off?
No, I can't give you an answer to that. I can tell you that at least the ability of the Iraqis to reinforce that part of their armed forces has been severely degraded by our attacks on his main supply routes, the bridges, the roads, the highways, and what have you. So there's definitely been an effect. No, I can't tell you it's cut off. No, sir. Yes, sir.
General, in last night's Scud attack on Tel Aviv, it appeared that the incoming Scud was not intercepted by a Patriot missile. Why were no Patriots fired at that Scud last night?
I'm not sure I understood the question. You say the Scud coming here.
On Tel Aviv.
Ah, I'd prefer not to comment about anything outside the theater of operations and ask you to take that question over there.
General, if
yes, sir.
many planes are going to Iran, doesn't that show that you've failed to destroy the airfields and the runways as much as you would have liked to? If they're
No,
able to
not
take
at all. When we go after airports, roads, targets of that nature, we continue to go after them. And the reason we do that is that you very seldom eliminate something like that with one strike. And the reason for that is the enemy can come back in and work repairs. So we go back again and again and again until his repair ability is degraded and he can no longer do it. But it's very difficult to take out all of a target. You can take out pieces of it. If you take out the appropriate parts of an airfield, it makes it very difficult to move the aircraft out to the runway, for example, from the hangars or from the hardened aircraft shelters. So we go after the pieces that we want to get, and we will continue to go back. But we very seldom get all of it in one blow. Yes, sir.
Well, there have been reports of chemical blowback from the Iraqi side. Have you any information about large-scale casualties on the Iraqi side from chemicals which have been destroyed by Allied attacks?
No, I have none, nor do I think we officially have any in the command. I'm not aware of that.
The second question, have you yet used the fuel-air explosive against the Iraqis?
No, I won't comment on what we have or haven't used in the way of specific weapon systems. Let me call on one I haven't, sir, I believe.
You already called on the. I have another question.
If it's a short one, I'll take you, and then I'll go back there.
It's the water supply for the Iraqi troops in Kuwait. Do you know if they have well water sources, or are they depending on tank water and water bladders for their drinking water?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sure the command knows. Yes, sir.
General, the Scud attack on Riyadh last night, the statement issued this morning said that it was launched from northern Iraq. Now, first of all, that puts it at the top limit of the range, even of the Al-Abbas, the longest range derivative. But secondly, does it indicate that they're perhaps moving their Scuds northwards to get them out of the range of our air attack?
I really don't want to comment on where he's launching his Scuds from.
That was the statement.
It was southern Iraq.
Was it?
Southern Iraq.
Sorry.
Okay. Yes, sir.
If I could follow up on the question of the oil slicks. The oil slicks that we've seen most of on television have been on the beach at Al-Hafji, which is obviously separate from the main slick. There's been the suggestion that that's been caused by Allied action. I wonder if you could fill us in on the source of the oil at Al-Hafji.
Absolutely false. To the best of our knowledge, any oil that's reached any beach in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or Kuwait has been as a result of enemy action at that specific site. And now, yes, sir.
General, when you suggested to me yesterday that once the Iraqi planes were in Iran, they weren't your problem anymore. And in fact, they were one more plane you wouldn't have to shoot down in the air. What made you so sure of that? And I have a follow-up. Why did you say that?
That's just a feeling I have, and I won't speculate on what may or may not happen.
To follow it up then,
yes,
if you can't stop Iraqi planes flying into Iran, what's to stop them flying back?
Us.
You're not patrolling the area, you said.
We'll get them. Yes, let me go over here first. Yes, sir.
General, there was a Navy pilot reported in the pool report the other day
as having sighted 30 or so Iraqis on an island who wanted to surrender. Has anyone looked in on those folks?
I'm not going to answer your question tonight. Yes, sir.
An earlier question. Why is it that you can't tell us in very general terms what is going to happen before you launch your ground assault? I mean, we don't
Simply
want specifics.
because, yes, no, and I understand your need for information. I really, I want to give you as much as I can. But I will not give out information that in any way endangers the lives of the coalition forces, and I think you can understand that. And if I give you sort of a general conception of what may or may not happen based on what set of circumstances, then that's just one more piece of information for the enemy, and I really don't want to do that. Yes, sir.
This feeling that you have about the planes in Iran, is this a feeling based on information that you cannot share with us, or is it a mere feeling that you have?
I think my best answer is to say that is a feeling